Okay, good afternoon. Let's begin.
Selamat siang.
My name is John Chair.
Nama saya
I'm the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Chinatown Development
Saya
Corporation.
mewakili
Welcome to our community center at Crane.
Chinatown di
សូម
Philadelphia.
ចូលរួមនៅក្នុងការប្រជុំនៅសហគមន៍របស់យើង
To direct your attention
非常欢迎
and,
大
and
家
let you know that we have
听
5
听看我们的会议。
Zoom language channels:
我的名字
Kita
是
ada channel 5 bahasa,
Indonesian,
Indonesia,
Korean,
会的
Korea,
Vietnamese,
Vietnam,
Khmer. And the links
dan Khmer.
are listed in the chat
Dan semua
box.
ada tercatat di kotak chat.
You can just follow the link.
Anda
Click
bisa
the
melihat
language
linknya
button at the bottom
dan
of
Anda
the
bisa
Zoom
memilih
screen
bahasa yang
and
Anda
select
mau.
your preferred language.
Jadi Anda bisa memilih
This
bahasa
language
apa saja yang Anda
access, I want to thank the U.S. Department of Justice
大
for
家
making this
看到
happen.
荧幕下
We
面
have to
有
support
一
this
个右下角
from
要
multiple
kan
languages, so thank you.
地址的对撞，
mengarahkan Anda ke
So I would like to begin.
bahasa yang Anda mau.
We are
Saya
meeting
akan
here
mulai.
today
Kita
because
berapat
I
di
care about
sini
your
然后
safety.
选择
Our
中文
community leaders care about your safety.
karena saya
And our
peduli
government
dengan
officials
negara ini.
who are here today
Petugas
care about
negara
your safety.
ini peduli
The
dengan
fact
keselamatan Anda.
is, Asian Americans are less safe today than they
Pada
were before
dasarnya
the start
orang
of the
Asia
pandemic.
kurang aman
Asian
sekarang
Americans
di
do not
negara
feel
ini.
当
safe.
天现在跟大家
And just
Amerika
recently,
tidak
there were two
merasa
serious
aman
incidents in October.
因为
dan ada
An
kejadian di
Asian
bulan
American
November
was punched in the face by a passer.
bahwa ada orang
ដែល
Asia
ត្រូវគេ
yang
បានវាយចំមុខ
Actually
នៅ
showed
ក្នុងខេត្តតុលា
wajahnya
walking back towards the victim to assault her.
dan dia diserang dengan
Yesterday,
waktu
ជន
dia
រងគ្រោះក៏
jalan.
បានបែកខ្នងទៅអ្នកដែលបានវាយដល់ខ្លួន
Beaten so badly near 12th and Sampson Streets that he was
គឺ
hospitalized.
នៅផ្លូវ12 និង Samson Street
What can we do?
Apa
Saya
yang
juga ikut
bisa
dalam
kita
And how do we
lakukan?
stop this targeted violence?
ដើម្បីនឹង
Apa
ទ
yang
ប់
bisa
ទល់ជាមួយនឹង
kita,
ទង្វើហិង្សាបែបនេះ
Representatives
yang
are
bisa
here
kita
today
mencegah
because they
atas
want
kejadian
these
besar
crimes and biases to stop.
dan
ព្រោះតែគេ
bagaimana
ចង់
kita
បានចង់
mencegah
ឲ្យទង្វើហិង្សានេះត្រូវបានបញ្
prasangka
ចប់
negatif ini.
And the partners who worked with PCDC to put this forum
Dan juga
together.
kita ada partner yang akan
Jun ban
bekerja
out
dengan
put,
PCDC
Time is limited tonight.
untuk masalah
So I'd
ini
like
dan
to now
malam ini
introduce
បង្កើត
to
ជា
you
ក្រុមបែបបទ
saya
នេះជាមួយ
senang
នឹង
leaders of
bisa
two law
berbicara
enforcement
dengan Anda
agencies.
dan ini penegakan
It's my
hukum
pleasure
dan
គឺជា
agensi yang
Jennifer
bekerja
ចិត្ត
Williams
សម្រាប់
dengan
របស់
kita.
ខ្ញុំដើម្បីណែនាំមកស្គាល់
Pennsylvania,
Dan
មកពី
saya
រដ្ឋ
suka saya
Pennsylvania
saya
And
senang
Pennsylvania
sekali bisa menjadi
Danielle
bagian ini
Outlaw
di negara
of the
bagian
Philadelphia Police
Pennsylvania
Department.
dan juga
And I welcome
keikut
you
sertaan
to
dari
remarks.
polisi
Ketua
So,
Philadelphia.
Lenahan.
Mr. General, we'll begin with you.
Thank you, John.
Kita akan
សូម
mulai
អរគុណ
dengan-
ច្រើន
Can we
First, thank you to the Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation.
យើងមកពីក្រុមសហគមន៍នៅទីក្រុង China នៅទីក្រុង Philadelphia ខ្ញុំសូមថ្លែងអំណរគុណដល់ក្រសួងផ្នែកខាងទម្រួត
As well as my colleagues here from
ហើយជាមួយ
ATF
នឹងសហការីជាមួយ
and
នឹង
FBI, all of
ATF
whom
ហើយ
work
នឹង
with us to
កិច្ចសម្ងាត់ទាំងអស់គ្នា
investigate
កំពុងតែធ្វើការជាមួយគ្នាដើម្បីនឹងធ្វើការស៊ើបអង្កេត
Finally, I
ចំពោះ
want
ប
to
ទអង្កេត
acknowledge and thank
ទាំងនេះ
the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations for their continued partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Tonight, we gather here to kick off
យើងបានជួបជុំ
Asian
គ្នា
今
Community
天晚
Safety
上呢，
Initiative
我们在
ដើម្បី
这里
នឹងធ្វើការប្រ
between
គល់
the U.S.
គ្នា
Attorney's Office,
为这
the
个
Philadelphia
非常
Police Department,
ជាមួយនឹងក្រសួង
FBI,
ប៉ូលីស Philadelphia
the Pennsylvania
ATF
Commission on Human Relations,
dan
and the
juga
Philadelphia Chinatown Development
ada
Corporation.
bekerja sama
Hai,
dengan
dan
Chinatown
Chinatown.
Philadelphia bekerja
Many
dengan
where we can share information
pemerintah
and learn from
Malaysia
you about what is happening in the community.
dan kami
Apa
akan
yang kamu
memberitahu
cakap lah,
Anda apa yang
uh,
terjadi di
Department
komunitas kami.
And it's through events like this one, this
Dan
evening, that we
melalui
connect
acara
with the
seperti
communities we
ini
serve.
kita akan
And it is how we can
berhubungan
most
dengan
directly share
komunitas dan
information with
kita
you
bisa
about what we
langsung
are doing
berhubungan
to make this
dengan
city a safer
komunitas.
place to live in.
Can we do the interpreter
This
thing
evening's
first?
town hall stems from our collective years of experience in
Can
law
anyone
enforcement
hear?
and from the crime
Yes,
trends
I can
that
hear
we
you.
see on
I can
Philadelphia.
hear
Yes,
you.
we need
This is
to-
the interpreter.
And what we
It's
see
right.
is
I'm
that
the Mandarin
far too
Chinese
often,
interpreter. We need to
criminals
let PCDC
specifically
know.
target members of
Yes,
the
We need to
I
send
can-
everyone to
They
the
are
room.
targeted for hate crimes and violent crimes because of
Let me
their
try to
ethnicity.
Thank you,
That
see if
Anna.
I
happens
can
far too often, which is
find
why
their phone
preventing
number.
hate crimes and stopping the alarming trend of violent crime in our city are among the Department of Justice's highest priorities.
抱歉
Now,
大
the
家
term
啊，我
hate
们现
crime
在
has a
需要把
very
这个
specific meaning under federal law, and we will learn more about that this evening. My
Dan
colleague
kita
Eric
akan
Dixon and
membicarakan
FBI
lebih
Special
jauh,
Agent
lebih
CJ
mengetahui
Jackson
dengan
will talk more in detail
pemerintah,
about their work
hukum
prosecuting
pemerintah
hate
dan
crimes and other civil
badan
rights
lainnya untuk
violations.
masalah ini.
And we
គឺ
will
ច
share
ង់ឲ្យ
contact
现在因为有很
លោក
多
to
位
report
这
if
个
you
ដឹង
believe
អំ
that
ពី
you or someone you
翻译
know
គោល
同
ដៅ
事
របស់
在
យើង
说
គឺធ្វើ
话。
យ៉ាងណាដើម្បីនឹង
On the topic of violent crime more
យកនៅ
generally,
ជន
you will hear from
ប្រព្រឹត្តបទអ
prosecutors
ក្រិត
Jeanette King and
Dan
Anthony
ក្រុម
juga
ប្រព័ន្ធ
kita
ទាំងអស់
akan
នេះ
mendengarkan
who
dari
prosecute robberies,
jaksa
ដើម្បី
penuntut
firearms offenses, and home
Janine
invasion
King.
robberies under the supervision of Janine Lenahan, the chief of our violent crimes unit. They, along with ATF special agents Rich
ATF
Antony
គឺជា
and
ផ្នែកគេ
Sarah
ពិសេស
Riley, will talk
Sarah
about what they
Riley
have learned through
ដឹង
their
និយាយ
work
អំ
with
ពី
victims from your community.
អឺ
And will share tips
ធ្វើ
that
ការជំ
hopefully
រុញជន
will
រ
help
ង
you
គ្រោះទាំងអស់
protect
នៅក្នុងសហ
yourself
គមន៍របស់
and your loved ones from
ប
being
ងប្អូនទាំងអស់
victimized.
គ្នា
Our goal is to
គោលដៅ
stop
របស់យើង
crimes
គឺដើម្បី
before
បញ្
they
ឈប់
occur.
នៅបទ
And
អ
tonight
ក្រិត
is an important
ព្រ
step
មតាន់
toward
ទាំងនេះ
achieving
ពី
that
ការ
goal.
កើតឡើង គឺជា
Finally,
ការ
I
សំ
want
ខាន់
to
នៅក្នុង
thank
ការបង្រៀន
you,
ជាមួយ
the
ខ្ញុំ
members
សូម
of
ថ្លែង
our
អំណរគុណ
community,
ស
who
មាជិក
have
នៅ
come
ក្នុង
here
គ្រួ
tonight
អឺ
to
សហ
engage with
គមន៍
law
របស់យើង
enforcement and work together towards a
ដើម្បី
positive
ធ្វើការរួប
change
រวมជាមួយ
and
នឹង
a
គ្នាដើម្បី
safer
ធ្វើឲ្យ
city.
មានការផ្លាស់ប្ដូរយ៉ាងវិជ្ជ
Inspire
មាន
us every day. Thank you.
ដើម្បីជួយគ្រប់គ្រងយើងជារៀងរាល់ថ្ងៃ
Okay, it is my pleasure now to
ជា
welcome
ជាតិសំណុំរបស់ខ្ញុំដើម្បីស្វាគមន៍
and ask her to give some remarks for this evening.
លោក Commissioner
Thank
មក
you.
និយាយមកកាត់យើងមក
Thanks,
គ្នា
John.
សូ
Thank
សូម
you,
ថ្លែងអំណរគុណ
Acting U.S. Attorney Williams. Good evening.
ជំរាបសួរ
Selamat
អរុនសួស្ដី
现在我们
Myself and the
我们
entire
正在要把这
saya
个
dan
音响
seluruh
ខ្ញុំ
修
ហើយ
理
នឹង
好。
សហគមន៍
dari
សមាជិ
pemerintah
កក្នុងសហគមន៍ទាំងអស់
in our Asian American and Pacific
dan kami
Islander
bagian
Jemput,
dari
ជនជាតិ
divisi
អាស៊ី
Asia
អាមេរិក
Tenggara
ក្នុងសហរដ្ឋអាមេរិក
again.
ខ្ញុំសូម
dan
និយាយ
kami
ម្ដង
akan
ទៀត
mulai.
Okay,
Uh,
there's a
Tunggu,
message.
Hamzah, Tunggu.
Hello everyone. There's a
Yes.
message in the chat box saying, please
And our
stop
department
translating
remains
so we
committed to
can
working
hear.
with our law enforcement and our community partners to not only address these concerns, but to make sure that our communities and the residents within these communities find that our neighborhoods are a safer place to live, to work, and to play. Of course, we absolutely cannot do this work alone. And that is why we are so fortunate to have such committed stakeholders who are willing to bring their expertise to the table. When I began speaking, I didn't share with you that I'm joined today by Deputy Commissioner Danielle and your district captain, Mike James.
Yes,
These are the folks who are doing the work. The folks that work.
Well, I'm gonna bring them in after.
Okay,
after you
okay.
finish. And
These are the folks here doing the work. We'll do our introduction shortly. But I want to make very clear, you're hearing from me. Obviously, I represent the department, but there are a lot of caring and compassionate people here that are down on the ground, not only listening to concerns, but relaying and liaisoning to make sure that your concerns are relayed to us in a timely manner. To that end, in addition to the members we'll introduce to you, the Philadelphia Police Department meets with the Philadelphia Police Asian Advisory Committee, or the PPAAC, PPAAC. And during these meetings, the committee keeps us updated with current issues and concerns that are important to the Asian American communities in our city.
the meeting is going on.
The advisory committee also assists our department with helping community-based organizations develop strategies and programs that enhance the social, cultural, and economic status of the Asian American community.
It says nobody's sure.
In addition, we have enhanced patrols in Asian American business corridors and residential
Do I
areas
put their name?
throughout the city. With all of this said, we know that there's still a great deal of crime that goes unreported. And to help mitigate that issue, the department worked with our partners to help improve the lines of communication between the AAPI community and the police department. One of those initiatives is one that we're encouraged to discuss today. Earlier this year, the PPD surveyed members of the patrol and detective bureaus in order to identify police officers, supervisors, and detectives that are interested in participating in a program of AAPI community outreach to be conducted jointly by the PPD and the U.S. Attorney's Office. This was done in a response to the feedback that we heard from you. Numerous police officers and sergeants from the Patrol Bureau, along with 4 investigators from the Detective Bureau, expressed an interest in participating in this program that's being guided by DC Nash. And we remain, again, committed to recruiting. So those who are interested in joining us out there, whether you're an officer, a detective, anywhere in the PPD world, you're still welcome to join us. Again, we remain committed to keeping people, everyone in our community safe. So I will now turn it over to DC Nash, who can introduce some of these members. And we'd like to say hello to.
Thank you, Commissioner Outlaw. Again, my name is Ben Nash, and I am the Deputy Commissioner for the Department. I oversee the investigations office of our department, and I work closely with our partners, led by the U.S. Attorney's Office, Jen Williams, and we've also worked with our city partners, Ramana Akiyama Lee, and I want to thank John Chin for allowing us and helping us to organize this. In response to the challenges of the past year and a half plus since the pandemic has started, it became clear that we needed to do more for the Asian community. And in that light, as the commissioner referenced, we reached out and put out an invitation to all of our police officers and investigators who are from the Asian community, and we believe could help the Asian community to better deal with all of the challenges that are faced. And we asked for individual officers to come forward, and we had a great response. And today, although we don't have all of the officers, all of our Asian officers, we have a good group of the officers that have been able to make it tonight. And at this point, I'm going to ask for them to come through, identify themselves, and explain where they work so that everybody can see these are the officers that are part of the Asian and Pacific Island community. So at this point, we're going to start bringing the officers through one at a time, and each officer will have a chance to say hello to the audience, say who they are and where they work.
All right, good afternoon. I am Sergeant Tony Wu, assigned to 6th Police District. I also speak Cantonese. Thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to be here today. I look forward to be in partnership with all the organizations here today, and I look forward to working with you guys.
Thanks, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Officer Chris Lyon, currently detailed to the Attorney General's office.
It looks like it's working for the 3 that.
Hello, everyone. I'm Detective Alan Rolova, assigned to Southwest Detective. Thanks. Good evening. My name is Devin Chatterton. I'm a detective assigned to Central Detectives here downtown.
Hello, my name is Officer John Chi Wang. I'm assigned here in the 6th District.
Hi, good evening. How are you doing? My name is Officer Fei Dang. I'm currently with the 12th District. Hello, my name is Wong Dong. I'm currently assigned for 17th District.
Hi, everyone. My name is Detective Dion Park. I'm currently assigned to Homeland Security. Thank you for the invitation. I know it's a very important issue for Asian community. I'm pleased to be part of it. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Yoon Sek Yin, currently assigned to the Citywide Vice Unit, and I speak the Korean language. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Detective Tommy Kim. I'm from Northwest Detective. I'm speaking Tibetan.
And there you have it. All members of the community, all members of the police community, the Asian community in partnership, and everybody is very much interested in trying to help the community from being targeted, stop, as the commissioner and as Attorney Williams indicated, we want to stop these attacks from happening and make everybody feel safer in their community. And I went to my right is Captain Matt James of the 6th District. Matt, you want to have just a couple words?
Everyone, how you doing? I appreciate you having me here tonight. John, thanks for the invitation, Commissioner. This attorney,
appreciate it. I've been here for almost 2 years, and I can say that we have so much support from the Chinatown community. And I look forward to working with everybody. I'm glad that we're bringing this to light and take some action. So I appreciate you having me. Thanks, man.
Great. Thank you very much for the introduction of the Philadelphia police officers. I think it's very important for all of us to know the multi-language resources that you have out there. Next, I would like to say that, not only are the leaders or the heads of these law enforcement agencies here, it's nice and important that they are here, but as you can see from the police department, they've brought along the frontline representatives. And that's the same for the U.S. Attorney General's office as well. Next, I would like to introduce to you Janine Lenahan, who is the Assistant U.S. Attorney and the Chief of Violent Crime Unit. And she has brought with her team of colleagues and peers who will talk to you about their units and talk to you about their experience with crime in the Asian American community and share with you some of their resources. And I'm sure, and they will be here as well to answer your questions after their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Good evening, everyone. My name is Janine Lenahan, and as John said, I am an Assistant United States Attorney, and I am Chief of the Violent Crime Unit for the United States Attorney's Office. For the past 4 years, the United States Attorney's Office has prioritized violent crime prosecution throughout the Eastern District of Pennsylvania in line with the Department of Justice's Project Safe Neighborhoods efforts aimed at bringing together federal, state, and local law enforcement to reduce violent crime. Those priorities include the investigation and prosecution of federal crimes, including Hobbs Act robbery, including home invasion robbery, bank robbery, kidnapping, carjacking, illegal possession of firearms, firearms trafficking, threats, arson, and crimes involving explosives. The Violent Crime Unit in the U.S. Attorney's Office is made up of 18 Assistant United States Attorneys, 3 of whom are with us tonight. In the audience, we have Deputy Chief Jonathan Ortiz. To my right, Assistant United States Attorneys Jeanette Kang and Anthony Crescent. The Assistant United States Attorneys who work throughout the United States Attorney's Office and in the Violent Crime Unit are skilled, experienced lawyers who are dedicated public servants committed to the pursuit of justice for all victims. And they are determined to work toward reducing the occurrence of these crimes in the Asian American community. We are here tonight to tell you that we are aware of the problem being violent crimes being committed against members of your community, that we understand that these crimes cause you, among other things, fear, anger, frustration, sadness, pain, and despair. We have been working and will continue to work diligently with the police and our federal agencies, such as ATF and FBI, to investigate these crimes, to identify the people committing these crimes, and to hold them accountable by prosecuting them. We also want to work with you all to prevent these crimes from happening, to restore your sense of peace and comfort as you go about your daily lives, hopefully without the fear of believing that you and your family members will be targeted. All of these people here tonight from the Philadelphia Police Department, from ATF, the FBI, the United States Attorney's Office, the Pennsylvania Commission on Human Relations, and the Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation have volunteered to be an active member in this initiative because they care. And lastly, for those individuals out there that either have planned to commit these crimes or have committed these crimes and have yet to be caught, who might be watching this town hall to see what this is all about, please know this. We know what you are doing, and we know why you are doing it. We are joined together with dedicated resources to stop you and to see that you are punished for hurting members of this community. If you are determined to line your pockets with money that you've stolen from hardworking people, you will be prosecuted federally and you will be punished in the federal system. You will now hear from Assistant United States Attorneys Anthony Carissimi and Jeanette Kang, who are joined by ATF agents Sarah O'Reilly and Philadelphia Task Force member with the ATF, Detective Richard Anthony.
Thank you. Good evening. As Janine said, my name is Anthony Carissimi. I'm an Assistant United States Attorney in the Violent Crime Unit here in Philadelphia. I'm here along with my colleague Jeanette Kang because members of the Asian community continue to not only be impacted by violent crimes, but also specifically targeted for violent crimes. As you know, crimes directed at the Asian community were only made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic and the dangerous and hateful belief that the Asian community was to blame for this disease. Our goal is to share with this community information that we have about violent crimes impacting and targeting the Asian community. To tell you about what we know about this problem, and based on what we've learned in these cases, some patterns of criminal activity that we think are not only informative, but can hopefully also help you stay safe and protect yourself. We also want to share with you what we are doing, and so that we can work with the Asian community to make sure that this violence stops. Unfortunately, we can't go into details about ongoing investigations that may exist. We can talk generally about the type of cases that we process. I'm not sure if our PowerPoint is visible, but if so, I ask you to change to the second slide. As federal prosecutors, we handle a limited universe of cases. My colleague Jeanette will explain the details of these charges shortly, but some of the common cases that we handle are home invasions, store robberies, and car theft. A home invasion occurs when a criminal breaks into a house, and when these are targeted at the Asian community, they're typically a home that is owned by an Asian business owner. Once they break in, they commit violent acts in order to steal money that they believe came from a victim's business. Store robberies occur at businesses. They often involve firearms and violence, where criminals steal money directly from the store. And a carjacking occurs when a vehicle is. We have prosecuted all of these crimes in the Violent Crime Unit and will continue to file charges in these cases. The agents at ATF that I work with, particularly the two agents officer on my right, work incredibly hard to investigate these cases. This is Special Agent Sarah O'Reilly, who is an agent at ATF, and Task Force Detective Rich Anthony, who works with the Philadelphia Police Department and with the ATF. They have investigated and solved crimes targeting the Asian community for years. They are excellent at what they do. They truly care about crime victims, and they are passionate about preventing these crimes in the future. So why is the Asian community in particular targeted for these crimes? The reason that Asian business owners are targeted is based on perceived stereotypes. And when I say perceived stereotypes, I am referring to information that we have obtained over the course of our investigation, over the course of the years, including sometimes from criminals themselves, about why immigrant business owners are targeted, particularly Asian business owners. Criminals believe that Asian business owners do not use banks, and therefore will have large amounts of cash in their homes. As a result, many of the crimes targeting businesses don't take place actually at the business. They take place at the business' houses. Criminals also believe that Asian business owners will not report their crimes to law enforcement, and that there will not be consequences for targeting them. In other words, criminals believe that they will be able to get away with their crimes because they will not be reported. Similarly, offenders believe that the Asian community is reluctant to follow through and come to court. This belief may be based on language barriers. It may be based on the long hours that people in the Asian community work, and unfortunately, prosecuting these cases can take up a great deal of time. It could also just be a general reluctance to deal with law enforcement. These beliefs and the targeting of the Asian community that results from them are not acceptable. I have worked on these cases with these two agents, and during that time, we have met with Asian business owners who have been targeted for robberies. They have told us in heartbreaking detail how their families have also been targeted for crimes. And they have told us that they feel sometimes that being the victim of violent crime is the cost of doing business in this country. That it is something that necessarily comes with the territory of owning a business here. That is absolutely wrong. Every business owner deserves to feel safe while at work, and every person deserves to feel safe in their homes. Everyone that I work with and everyone who is here tonight is dedicated to ensuring that the practice of targeting the Asian community for violent crime ends, and that the people who do target the Asian community are brought to justice. Next slide, please. How do these offenders commit their crimes? One of the most common features of these crimes that we see is surveillance and tracking that occurs before the crime is even committed. The offenders may actually go to the restaurants, stores, businesses themselves and look to see when the owners are coming and going. Alternatively, they may use GPS tracking devices. These GPS tracking devices are commonly available on Amazon, and they allow offenders to track the locations and movements of business owners. The tracker sends a message to an application on a smartphone that shows the location of the tracker when the car that they're frequently placed on, and the criminals can track them in real time. These devices are very small. They're often smaller than a smartphone, and they allow offenders to track the business owners from the location of their business back to their homes. Now, I know the prospect of being tracked is scary, and we do not tell you this to make you afraid. The reason we are providing this information is it's something that we have learned through the course of investigating these crimes. Frequently, the tracking and surveillance occurs while the stores are being opened for business in the morning or closed for business in the evening. So what are some of the steps that can be taken to prevent this? Next slide, please. First, surveillance cameras can be installed and monitored in multiple locations at a business and at a house, both inside and outside. These locations should be monitored so that suspicious behavior, including people sitting outside of the business over the course of many days, before opening and after closing, can be, that was something that we would consider suspicious behavior, or any activity that occurs at or around a business owner's car. These incidents should be reported to police, who can in turn, where appropriate, alert their federal partners and investigators. If we are made aware of these incidents before they happen, we may be able to prevent them. If possible, alarm systems should be installed at homes to protect your houses when you are not there. We have had cases that we've investigated where alarms have gone off and prevented burglaries from happening before they even take place. Finally, we also encourage everyone to use banks to protect their money. I have met members of the Asian community during the course of my investigations who are some of the hardest working people I have ever met. The money that you earn should be safe, and the easiest way to protect your hard-earned money is by keeping it in banks. Finally, and as I stated before, business owners are commonly targeted when they open and close their businesses, and it leaves people especially vulnerable during these times. We recommend that you be aware of your surroundings and be alert when opening and closing. If something does not look right, you should report it to police. When these things are reported, officers, detectives, these agents, and prosecutors in this city will do everything they can to make sure justice is served. My colleague, Jeanette Kang, is now going to speak to you in a little more detail about the cases we prosecute and address some concerns you may have about the process of criminal prosecution.
Anthony. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeanette Kang, and I am Assistant United States Attorney in this district. And I want to talk at a high level about federal robbery, the law of robbery. And as Janine pointed out earlier, this is not the only type of federal crime that we prosecute in the violent crime unit. But as my colleague Anthony said, we're unfortunately seeing a lot of this type of crime. So I want to focus on federal robbery today. It is a crime to commit robbery using force or threats of force. Taking money, demanding money through force. That could be hitting someone, threats of force. That could mean pulling a gun out, threatening to injure the store employee. And it is a federal crime, meaning our office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, can charge it if that robbery affects something called interstate commerce. Interstate commerce is defined broadly, and I'll give a few examples. A robbery of a business affects interstate commerce if that business receives products from other states. A robbery affects interstate commerce if that business serves out-of-state customers, a restaurant, a hotel, a motel, serving customers. Another example is a taxi driver. Affects interstate commerce if the taxi driver drives people across state lines, delivers packages across state lines. My colleague Anthony mentioned to you home invasions. We can also prosecute at the federal level home invasions that target business owners. The idea behind that is the proceeds of the business, the money that you earn at the business is taken home, and business owners may be targeted because of the money that they're taking home. When they're robbed at home, a home invasion, we treat that essentially as if a store is being robbed. At the federal level, we can also charge as a separate crime the use of guns during a robbery. This is an effective and a powerful tool for the federal government to ensure that people who use guns in a robbery receive a higher sentence. It goes without saying that crimes involving guns are serious. They put lives at risk. And our use of this statute certainly reflects the seriousness of that crime. And as we've seen a lot in our unit and the cases that we take, the crimes that we prosecute, and these officers know, these agents know, Philadelphia has a gun problem. The city of Philadelphia is ravaged by guns, by illegal guns, and by gun violence. And I want to note that this problem, armed robberies, the gun problem, is not limited to the bounds of the city of Philadelphia. What I've seen personally in the cases that I've worked on, what my colleagues are seeing is that stores outside of the city of Philadelphia, in the suburbs, are also being targeted. Home invasions are happening in the suburbs as well. We're seeing guns outside of the city of Philadelphia as well. We can also charge these robberies in a lot of different ways. The PowerPoint slide that's in front of you references attempts. It talks about aiding and abetting. It talks about conspiracy. I think the best way to explain is by example. Take, for instance, a robbery of a store involving 3 people. 2 people stand guard. One person stands guard at the door, and one person actually walks up to the store employee, points the gun at the store employee, demands cash. The 3rd robber is outside in a car, the getaway driver, waiting for the robbery to be completed so that he can help the other 2 in there flee. We can charge all 3 of these people under these theories. We can charge them even if they are unsuccessful in the robbery, even if they don't actually take any cash. We can charge attempts. We can charge them for planning a robbery. My colleague Anthony explained to you about these GPS trackers that we're seeing criminals use to track their victims. We can charge planning and taking steps toward committing a robbery. The next slide. So this slide, investigation and charging. And what I want to say here is that federal agencies work with each other, work with other federal agencies, and also work with local police departments like the Philadelphia Police Department in investigating and in prosecuting crimes. They work together for a number of reasons, and I can say that collaboration and partnership is crucial, especially with the police departments. These officers, the Philadelphia Police Department, they know this city, they know the neighborhoods, they know the communities, they know the members of the communities, they have relationships with people in this city. Information that they have and the relationships that they have, the knowledge that they have, I think these agents would agree with me, are invaluable, incredibly important, oftentimes necessary in prosecuting a lot of violent crimes. Next slide, please. investigation and charging. So this slide lists a lot of different investigative techniques that law enforcement officers and agents use to gather evidence in deciding whether to present a case to be charged. This is not a complete list, but these are some of the most common techniques. There are a lot of different ways. There are a lot of different ways we can gather evidence, and there's a lot of different types of evidence. There's physical evidence, fingerprints, documents, things left behind by the criminal at the scene of the crime. There is electronic evidence that can include surveillance videos. It can include information from cell phones, calls that were made, GPS location data. And finally, the last bullet point on this slide is interviews. I cannot stress enough the importance of witness interviews, victim interviews, talking to the people who saw and who experienced and know about the crime that's occurred. If you think about the physical evidence and the electronic evidence as pieces of a puzzle, interviews of witnesses, interviews of victims, that tells us what the puzzle looks like. Next slide, please. I want to stay on the topic of interviews for just a bit. Reporting crimes is essential. It is crucial. Most of the cases that we prosecute in our unit start by a victim of a crime or a witness to a crime calling 911, reporting a crime to the police or to federal agents. And I want to stress the importance of timeliness, of reporting and providing information quickly for a number of reasons. One being, we need to talk to you as the witness, as the victim, when your memory is fresh, when the information is still right there. And we also need to talk to you when the evidence is still there. Evidence can disappear. Physical evidence, fingerprints can be left on, notes left behind can be thrown away. Electronic evidence. I want to take the example of surveillance videos. Surveillance videos are crucial. They are so important in a lot of our cases. For example, if a store is robbed, let's say a store is down the street has to point outside. Now that video that this store down the street has, however, if the store does not report the police, the federal agents don't know that. The agents wait. It's possible that this store down the street, in the regular course of their business, they regularly delete surveillance videos every other day. If the crime is reported today, they need to delete it. That can be other ways to assist, being available, and if you are taking score available for officers. I can tell you an example.
It's going to be too much data.
Walked around the school. The owner showed us. The robber was standing here, I was standing here, the customer was standing here, and the robber went that way. That was so incredibly helpful in the investigation and in the determination of whether we can charge the crime. Now, with that being said, I want to make sure you can hear me. Now, with that being said, this is our job. Our job is to investigate and to prosecute people who commit crimes. Our job is to help and to serve this district, including this community. Part of the reason we wanted to take part in this town hall, to host this town hall, is to not only hear from you, but we also wanted to share with you information that hopefully can help you
help us and work with us so that we can better serve this community and this district. Now, we've attended a number of these kinds of meetings and town halls and workshops in which we discussed some of the issues that are facing the Asian community. We're aware of the uptick in the violence directed at members of the Asian community. And I want to sum up some of the things that we've been hearing from the community. And I know this is not an exhaustive list, but we're hoping that this gets a dialogue started. We've heard about the costs of reporting, about talking to the government, concerns that being part of the process will take up valuable time that you need to run your business. We've heard about concerns about retaliation from the defendant, particularly when the criminal lives in the same neighborhood as the people who are victimized. We've heard concerns about language barriers. We've heard concerns about immigration issues. We've heard concerns about government inaction. We've heard from the community that one of the barriers to reporting and working with the government is this concern that, look, even if I report, even if I take time out of my day to work with you, what's going to come from it? Is this person going to be charged for the crime? We've also heard cultural concerns. We've heard, we understand for immigrants, people from different cultures, different countries, different areas, there may be cultural reasons for choosing not to report. Police may be viewed differently in different countries and in different cultures. Maybe crime is viewed differently. Maybe there's even shame about being victimized. We hear those concerns and we want to work with this community to find ways that we can help address these concerns. As my colleague Anthony explained, people who victimize members of the Asian community think that the victims will not report, think that they won't follow through, and we have to prove them wrong. That's why we're here. Now, we don't have an answer to everything, but here's what we can say. We promise we will try. We are trying. We'll work with you, we'll work with this community. We have resources in place that can help us with that. It is incredibly important that you report crimes and that you follow through. I want to briefly touch on some of the things I said. Costs of reporting, we are flexible. We don't have to stick to a 9-to-5 schedule. Retaliation concerns. We are aware of and we are sensitive to the issue of possible retaliation. No one should have to fear talking to the police. Law enforcement officers and the federal agents can certainly assist with this. They are aware of these issues. I have many cases where the victims of crimes have the federal agent's cell phone numbers in their phones and call them if they have any concerns. And in the worst case scenario, if the fear turns to reality, we can certainly work with the victims on additional protective measures. Language barriers. There are, as you saw, there are many officers, there are many agents, there are many people in our office who can assist with translations, who speak who speak a variety of different languages. The immigration issues. Concerned about deportation, about removal, and here's what we can say. We're federal prosecutors for the United States Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Our mission is to seek justice for victims of crime. Our mission is not to deport or to remove victims who report crimes. Our agencies have victim witness specialists who can assist with these concerns, who can introduce you to nonprofit organizations and to attorneys who can assist. In action. While we cannot promise that every reported crime will be prosecuted federally, because sometimes it's not a federal crime, sometimes it's more appropriate that it's resolved in a different way. I can tell you that we work diligently to make that decision. These officers, these agents in our office. And our goal is to keep victims informed about what happens to their case. And I also want to point out that just because the crime that you report does not get charged does not mean it was not useful. It can certainly be helpful in other crimes. Finally, the cultural reasons for not reporting or possibly working with law enforcement. We know that this is not something we can change at its core. How we were raised, where we come from, our families, all of that is so deeply ingrained in us. The only thing that we can tell you is that we need you, we need your help. We want to understand. We want to be sensitive to cultural beliefs, practices, concerns, anything. Speaking personally, I am Korean American. I was raised by Korean American parents in a Korean American home. And I like to think that this means that I can understand maybe a little bit better other people who were raised in households just like mine. And with that said, if you look around this room and you saw all the officers who walked through, they look like this community. They represent this community. They were raised in the same kinds of households as members of this community. I know that federal agencies, our office also has people who look like members of this community. The diversity in our ranks is truly a message to this community that we understand, we're trying to understand, and we want to understand. So the final slide, so I want to say thank you from our unit, and there's contact information for ATF if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you.
I want to thank this panel very, very much. My gathering of this presentation is that not only is there tremendous resource within this department and agency at the federal level, but there is a commitment, a passion, and a strong investigative unit that is looking at these types of crimes in general, and specifically crimes targeting Asian Americans. And Janine talked about it. We have to figure out how to bridge and strengthen the connection between the community and these agencies. Next, I would like to introduce to you two people. Deputy Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney of Corruption and Civil Rights in Philadelphia, Eric Gibson, and Special Agent of the FBI in Philadelphia. Must be a cool guy because he goes by an initial CJ Jackson. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce these two gentlemen to you, who's going to talk about civil rights. Thank you.
CJ is pretty cool. I am not. So I'm going to let him start. But before we get to the heart of it, and hopefully our first slide is displayed at the moment, we wanted to talk to you, not to repeat anything that our colleagues said, but we wanted to talk to you about hate crimes in particular, because hate crimes strike at the very core of what it means to be a community. And at the federal level, what that often means is increased stakes for the defendants. That is, we are able to punish the defendants to a significant degree that sometimes exceeds what the state and local authorities are able to do. Personally, I've prosecuted hate crime offenses all the way from a misdemeanor, which means only up to a year imprisonment, or capital punishment. And there's a whole broad range of activity that falls in between. So what we wanted to do was, in the limited time that we have, talk to you about what the federal hate crime statutes are. For those of you who are still in the room, the doors are going to be locked in a moment because we're going to give you an exam and you're not going to be able to leave until you can answer our questions about the elements of the offenses that we're going to go over with you tonight. But with that, I want to turn it over to CJ, who's going to talk for a moment generally about the FBI's outreach program right now, dealing specifically with hate crimes, which are a priority for both the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Good evening. Special Agent CJ Jackson, FBI Philadelphia. I work violent crimes, which include particularly hate crimes. I also oversee international human rights violations as well. This has been a very large initiative that's been put out by the FBI as far as outreach, because we know there can be sometimes a difficult actually how you report a crime, when you can report and how you can report it. So one of the things that we've done as far as one of the initiatives is we are going into communities where we can actually broadcast, which will be, if you can see on top of your screen, billboards on how to actually report these hate crimes. Because to start off everything, it has to be reported for us to even know if anything's going on. So this has been an initiative that's been pushed through the Federal Bureau of Investigation as far as going through nationwide, not just Philadelphia, but nationwide as far as how to report hate crimes, where to report them. And so you can actually see a visual on how we are trying to better accommodate people and how to actually reach out.
Can we go to our second slide, please?
So by definition, a hate crime is a criminal offense against a person or property motivated in whole or in partly by the individual's bias against race, religion, disability, ethnic, national origin, sexual orientation, gender, or gender identity. In order for the FBI to actually get into an investigative portion of a hate crime, we have to prove that the subject is committed a crime willfully, that he was motivated by these biases, like which is what I mentioned just briefly, and it's a actual act of violence.
We'll go to our next slide, please.
Earlier this year, we, and I say we, I'm talking about the Philadelphia Division, partnered with the Philadelphia Police Department and the Philadelphia Commission of Human Relations, and came up with a strategy actually to start advertising more, which is what that first billboard is that showed, that was on our first slide, came out within the last, I believe, like month or so. Prior to that, earlier this year, we partnered, like I said, with our liaison partners, and we came out with another billboard. Show you how to report either through locally with the Philadelphia Police Department, Philadelphia Commission of Human Rights, Philadelphia Commission of Human Relations, I'm sorry, and the FBI. So there's 3 different ways to report it, and that was, you should have seen these billboards earlier as well in the in 2021.
Can we go to our next slide?
And I will cover some of these statutes briefly. So some of the statutes under the under civil rights will be the Fair Housing Act, which is a 42 USC 3631. There's also a 247, which is church arson interference with religion. There's also a 249, which is the overall Hate Crimes Prevention Act, the Shepard-Byrd Act. There's also a 245, which is the interference with federally protected activity, and also a conspiracy of 241. And Eric will talk a little bit more in detail of those.
So if we could go to our next slide, please. We're going to start with the Fair Housing Act. But before we do that, our colleagues talked about the importance of reporting. CJ has just made a point of how you can report to us. Part of our purpose here this evening is to help you understand what it is that happened, if in fact a hate crime has taken place or you feel that one has taken place, and why we're asking you certain questions or why we're trying to collect certain evidence. Because in this area of the law, as I said, it's important for us to call these crimes what they are and to try and heal the community when they take place. But in order for us to do that, we need to collect accurate, complete information about what happened. So that is, we don't folks to come in and exaggerate what happened, but more critically, we don't want people to come in and minimize what happened. There's a reason for the questions that we ask. There's a reason for our interest in particular kinds of evidence, because in this area of the law, unlike a lot of other areas, it's not enough to prove that it happened. We have to prove why it happened. And that's where the difficulty sometimes comes in. With respect to the Fair Housing Act, 3631, first of all, let me say, you can see in the display here, if you're familiar at all with American history, unfortunately, this country's got somewhat of a tortured history as it relates to hate crimes and hate-motivated criminal activity. The symbols that you see in the image that are depicted here, which depict kind of a historically typical issue of an infraction of 42 USC 3631, intimidating somebody from living in a particular community or trying to prevent somebody from living or enjoying leasing an apartment, owning a home in a particular community. The symbols here to us communicate something. They communicate the intent behind the defendants, whether it's the uniform worn by the Klansmen in this picture or the swastika that's on display on fire, which is intended to communicate a message. To us, that means something. It's not just that this event took place, but it's why it took place. And when it interferes with somebody's right to live and enjoy their place in the community, that can be a potential violation of 42 United States Code Section 3631. We go to the next slide, please. The next statute I want to talk about is 245. The whole purpose in talking to you tonight is to make clear that everybody in this community enjoys civil rights, and those rights are protected by the federal government. The government, in fact, has an obligation to protect those rights. When those rights are violated by private actors or public actors, there are statutes available to us to prosecute, 245 being one of them. Some of these statutes are not necessarily perfect tools for us because, as I said, we have to prove why something happened, not just that it took place. With respect to 245, what I would like you to understand is that this statute covers use of force or threats of force, where the defendant is motivated to cause their attack based on perceived bias or prejudice against the victim. But that's only the first part. The second part of 245 requires a federal right to be at issue. So what are we talking about in terms of the federal right? In our next slide, if you could display that, please. We've listed for you here what are typically covered under this statute. If somebody is attacking you because you're Asian American or Indian American or African American, and they're doing so because you are exercising one of these federal rights, getting an education, using a restaurant open to the public, using mass transit, flying on a plane, traveling in interstate commerce. These are all rights that everybody enjoys, and nobody can infringe on those rights with violence or threats of violence when we can show that that is motivated in part by, first, the bias or the prejudice against the victim, but also because the victim is exercising a particular right. We can move to the next slide, please. We often get a lot of questions in this particular area as it relates to threats. What the federal statutes do not punish is free speech. I can't make somebody a better person. I can't remove a hateful motivation from somebody's speech. I can use it as proof of their intent when they violate one of these statutes with violence or with the threat of violence. But if we're talking about a threat, and only some of these statutes cover threats, 3631 covers threats, 245 covers threats. We'll get to 249 in a minute, and it does not. But 245 does. And when we're talking about a threat, we're talking about an actual communication of some form of violence, something that causes the victim to feel concern for their personal safety. There's an objective component to this and a subjective component. Did the defendant intend to transmit that threat, to voice that threat? The threat one that a reasonable person, the objective part, would perceive as a threat. We could go to the next slide, please. 247, which CJ made reference to a few moments ago, we often refer to it because it was specifically intended to prevent church bombings and church arsons, but it's not limited to any particular religious affiliation. Any religious affiliation is protected by this statute. If a church, a synagogue, a mosque, any of those types of institutions is damaged by a criminal intending to convey threats or damage those properties with the intent to intimidate individuals from exercising their freedom of religion, that is covered by 42 United States Code Section 247. As again, unfortunately, in this history, in this country, we've had to deal with the history and the reality of the fact that often our religious institutions have been targeted for hateful behavior and resulted in violence and occasionally even death. In cases where this individual victims are killed or maimed, that elevates the penalties associated with this particular statute. If we're just talking about property defacement, that's still an offense, but it may just be a misdemeanor offense. Whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, CJ and I want to hear about it, and we will investigate it, and where we can, we will prosecute it. We go to the next slide. This is the Shepherd-Bird Act, which was passed in an attempt to make it easier for the federal government, federal prosecutors, and the FBI to prosecute people. Whereas 245, we talked about a moment ago, requires us to show, prove offer proof in court beyond a reasonable doubt that the attack was not just motivated because of somebody's perceived race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or the like. We also had to prove that a federal right was being violated as well. This statute was meant to relieve us of that second prong. It's based on other constitutional provisions. I'm going to turn this into a law school exam. But the problem with this statute is it doesn't cover threatening behavior. There has to be injury. Injury, for our purposes in prosecuting one of these cases, can be slight. But the statute generally requires injury or attempt to cause injury with the deadly weapon. If we don't have the deadly weapon, then there is an injury requirement, and we need to talk about candidly the injury that was experienced by the victim in this sort of circumstance. 245 is always a felony. 249 is always a felony. 245 without injury is a misdemeanor. But these are the tools that we have available to us to deal with these types of incidents. And 249 also was intended to protect sexual orientation in addition to what historically have been covered by the federal hate crime statutes. Can we go to the next slide, please? I just want to take a moment and illustrate federal government's commitment to dealing with hate crimes. Earlier this year, Congress passed a statute meant to provide additional resources, specifically as it related to hate crimes, giving us the tools that we need to be able to prosecute these, but also giving law enforcement agencies the resources to collect information regarding what types of crimes are being committed so that we can properly deploy our resources. The COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act was passed to recognize the difficulty that we're having as a country right now dealing with these issues, and again, to expand the resources that we have available to us to figure out what's happening out there and hopefully bring the resources of the federal government to bear on prosecuting these offenses. Can we go to the next slide, please?
So if you want to report a crime, how would you go about doing it? So there's a couple of ways. You can actually call, which is a couple of different numbers, the 1-800-CALL FBI, which is national. And there's also 2 divisions within the state of Pennsylvania. Of course, there's one right here in Philadelphia that's right at 600 R Street. You can actually walk in and actually have a complaint in person. There's also, per that billboard that you saw earlier, tips.fbi.gov. If you come in, you submit any type of a complaint, the complaint will then be reviewed by agents such as myself. I will then converse with Eric and also possibly the Department of Justice down in DC, and we'll see if it rises to the federal nexus, or if we actually have to do a little bit more investigative work to make it rise to a federal prosecution. Or if not, we also work with our local law enforcement partners as well, and possibly go with the district attorney as well.
So just a word on that for a moment. As was alluded to by my colleagues earlier, the Philadelphia Police Department is here. We're grateful for their presence. We're grateful for their assistance and for their commitment to policing the neighborhood. FBI, in the person of CJ Jackson, is also here. We work hand in glove whenever we can on these cases. Sometimes it will make sense for a variety of reasons for the police department and the local district attorney's office to deal with some of these offenses. Because as I've said, the requirements on us, the stakes raised for the defendants significantly in a lot of instances. That's certainly true. But some of the burdens on us in terms of what we have to prove raise also. So when we can't establish the proof that we need in federal court to convict on a hate crime, it might make sense for the state to take the lead instead. And so we communicate and we work with each other. And if you're reporting to the FBI, they're going to talk to the police department, who likely were the first responders initially. The point just is law enforcement works cooperatively to assist you, to protect you, and to hold individuals who commit these crimes accountable. And we need you to communicate with law enforcement, both with Philadelphia Police Department and also with FBI, so that we can figure out what tools we have to bring to bear when something like this happens. We go to the next slide, please. So just general, some of the takeaways. What are we looking for? What do we need to understand to determine whether or not federal hate crime took place? Well, on this particular slide, we've given you some bullet points of some of the evidentiary issues we're going to be interested in. Where did it happen? Is it a public facility? Is it a public park? Is it a public transit situation? Was education being interfered with? Was an employment right being interfered with? Was a right to live in a particular area being interfered with? How was the threat communicated? That assists us both in understanding what we have to do to collect the evidence, if it's by email or telephone or cellular phone, or it's a note. It may have some jurisdictional ramifications. In other words, we may have federal jurisdiction when the threat is transmitted in one way, but not have federal jurisdiction when the threat is transmitted in another way. And then again, we might bring in our partners from the Philadelphia Police Department if it's something that we can't handle. We're looking at the totality of circumstances. What did the victim experience? What was said to the victim? What was said by the defendant during the assault? What was said after the assault? If there are social media and the defendant has a presence on social media, that is often to us very, very helpful in determining whether or not we can establish intent as it relates to these motivations that we've been talking about. In a nutshell, those are the federal statutes that we have to work with. They cover a lot of incidents or types of incidents, but we need you to talk with us about what happened. We need you to be candid. We need you to trust us to want to help you. We're not trying to inconvenience you with the interview process. We're trying to collect information. It's a necessity in order for us to hold individuals accountable for what they did. Nobody should be a victim, ever. But when it happens, we need as much information as we can collect in order to make sure that the right thing happens at the end of the day and the perpetrators are held accountable. As I said at the beginning, these crimes that we're talking about right now strike at our very ability to live in a community together. And so we want to work together to make sure that individuals, when they upset the balance in that community, are held accountable. If you have any questions, CJ and I will be around for the question and answer period. You have our contact information and the FBI's contact information generally. We're always happy to take the call. And if we can't handle the case, we will be happy to explain why. When we can, or if we need additional information from you, please understand, we're not trying to be invasive or intrusive. We're not trying to create the awful experience of being a victim all over again. But we need to determine exactly what happened so that we can then prove it later in court. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Special Agent Jackson, and thank you, Deputy Chief Assistant Gibson. The one key word I think we can take away is the word trust. So I think we need to work together to build the trust between the government agencies and the people in the community. We will open it up to questions and answers, but before we do that, I want to introduce to you our last final speaker of the evening, who is also a member of Asian American community here in the local Philadelphia community. And he's had the burden and the challenge of taking on these reports of bias and hate crimes against the Asian American community. But we're happy and glad that Mr. Randy Duque is in that position as Deputy Director of Community Relations Division of the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations. In addition, he's also a commissioner of the Governor's Commission on Asian American Affairs and chairs the Committee on Civil Rights Task Force. So with that, I'd like to invite Mr. Randy Duque to speak to us. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I don't want to take too much of your time because I want to get to the question and answers. But, excuse me, I assume my slides are up online. So basically, the slides are providing information to people on what we do at the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations. We are the city's agency that enforces the civil rights and anti-discrimination laws. We are involved with these hate crimes and bias incidents because not, as you heard tonight, you heard a lot about what a hate crime is. Well, not everything that happens is criminal, and that's where we come in. First of all, the Commission on Human Relations is the city's official civil rights law enforcement agency. We do that through through our compliance division. In our slide, it talks about our divisions. We have our compliance, which basically enforces those anti-discrimination laws as it pertains to the workplace, housing, and public accommodation. Note that in Philadelphia, there are twice as many protected categories than the state or federal level for these anti-discrimination laws. My unit, the Community Relations Division, is here to educate people on what their civil rights are in the city, as well as to work and respond to conflict as they occur. We also coordinate these community and government network to respond to hate. With that said, as I said, in the next slide, you'll see is that just to give you a number of what happened this year in terms of collecting reports of hate, we've had between January 1st and September 30th, there had been 60 hate and bias instances that were reported to our agency. And 22 of those instances involved victims of Asian communities. That does not include the ones that John Chen had talked about earlier today that happened in the past week. But also we also want to note that these numbers do not reflect how many incidents have actually occurred in the city. So that's one of the things that this whole tonight is about, to really encourage the importance of reporting. In the next few slides that you'll see is I give you different incidents of what hate and bias. So for example, and these are real things that occurred throughout the state. So for example, 2 young teenage males cursed at and made anti-Asian statements such as "Go back to your country, you," before throwing an unopened soda can at an elderly Chinese woman. Similar incidents of harassment in this past had occurred to complainants and others from the Chinese community in that neighborhood. Another incident that we recorded was at an Asian American woman and her family were walking in a park when 3 teenagers running through, yelling at people in the area, stopped and pointed at that family, yelling "coronavirus." And one more example is that here, a heavily intoxicated person threw a beer bottle through his neighbor's window, yelling racial slurs and other phrases, including "terrorists" and "immigrants, go back to your country." Now, you heard again a lot tonight about hate crimes and reporting it. And there is that nexus where not everything becomes, it can be charged as a hate crime, whether it be a federal level or local. But the question in the next slide would be is like, does it really does it matter if the situation is a hate crime or bias instance? Right? Not to the person who's experiencing that hate. Also, it's not the victim's responsibility to determine if it was an act of a hate crime or a bias instance, but it's important to understand what the importance of reporting is. With that said, why is it important to report? First of all, it helps prevent others from being targets of hate. Right? We can tracking incidents such as bias or hate will help us in knowing how serious the issue is in a particular area of the city, in the city in general. It can help, by tracking these incidents, it can help to reallocate resources to a particular area or develop new policies and laws to help stop these acts. Patterns of similar incidents may also lead to further actions, such as, like I said, organizing events on a community level, connecting with people with services, creating new services to help prevent these things from occurring. And also, if it's criminal or a lot of this pattern from the same person, it could lead to arrests. Right? Note that local, state, federal laws may apply to threats as well. So just because something might be a First Amendment right doesn't necessarily mean that it might not lead to something more serious. Okay, so just to let you know, again, reiterating how to report. In Philadelphia, we say, for any emergency, call 911. Right. Get to a safe place situation, a safe place, call 911 in case of emergencies. For the city of Philadelphia, you can contact my office, the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations. Our office number 215-684-670. You saw that there's billboards that are that we work in partnership with the FBI and Philly Police. Also, along the broad line, there are new report hate ads in partnership with SEPTA And then finally, we also have some kiosk information that are throughout Center City in terms of reporting hate. And then you can also email us. But the important part is that there are several different layers on and various ways that you can report. The last thing I want to note is you heard throughout the evening, you heard about the Philadelphia Police Asian American Advisory Committee. I actually sit on that as well. And the cases that you heard mentioned that happened just in a couple of weeks of the Indian American and Chinese or Asian woman, those things were actually reported in that avenue. I heard it through my office. You know, police also have reports on it. So what I'm saying is, it doesn't matter where you report it. It just matters that you do report it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Randy. At this time, like the agency leaders to stay close to the front table. I'm sure there's going to be many questions that you will have to answer for us. So I also would like the social media staff to look at the chat rooms and see who has questions online for us. But let's begin with some of our guests in the who are attending in person tonight. This is the opportunity for you to present your comments or questions because we have the attention of the federal and local agencies here tonight. Well, let me start it off, Deputy Commissioner Nash. You know, Chinatown is a very unique community, and I guess fortunately for some of the police districts, they're moving into a brand new building. We're sort of lamenting that fact here in this community. I was just with a group of business owners yesterday. They were very concerned that our 6th district, which is in this community, and which has addressed quite a number of crimes since July, will be leaving our neighborhood. And the question came up in our discussion with the businesses: can the city keep a substation here in this community where representatives from the 6th district can still serve this community? Because one of the challenges we have here is the issue of language, culture, and trust. And some of these officers have built a very strong rapport with the residents and businesses in this community. I don't know if you have the answer for us tonight, but it was discussed and asked at a business meeting yesterday.
Well, thanks, John. It's a great question. Thanks for putting me on the spot.
No.
I don't have the powers of the purse to say and make any commitments at this point. But let me just kind of give a little background. We are a block away from the 6th district under the leadership of Matt James. We've had outstanding commanders at the district, and I know that they're right in your backyard. They're very close. We're not going that far. We're going up to, I don't have the exact move date, but it'll be at Broad and Callow Hill at the old Inquirer building. They'll be very accessible there. So yes, it's not going to be a 1-block walk. It might be a 4-block walk. Whether we can get a substation there, it's something that we'll have to, I'll talk to the police commissioner and we'll have some discussions. There are mini stations in other parts of the city. Whether we are able to have the resources to do that, I don't know. But everything that Randy has really been emphasizing and that Eric has been emphasizing, and you've heard from all the speakers, it doesn't matter where we are. The reporting, the call, 911, the Commission on Human Relations, to the U.S. Attorney's Office, to the FBI. The report is what gets the investigation started. So it all starts with that. We're never more than a phone call away. And if you call 911, we will respond to where the person who is a victim of crime is.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
That's okay, John.
Let's open it up to people in attendance here. I see some business owners and community leaders. Maybe I can put Mr. Adam Sue on the spot. You're a community leader, but you also represent a significant large portion of the business community.
Yes, chairman of Asian American Licensed Beverage Association, and there were some familiar faces with the U.S. Attorney's Office, which helped us successfully prosecute the AP 47, the criminals who has been unfortunately mortally prosecuted by
Governor's office, the DA's office, then U.S. attorneys stepping and got the fair justice for us. So my question here is how, let's say there's a crime happened, is that how do we report? Usually the police officers get involved first, the local prosecution get involved first. How do we get to the U.S. attorney's level, the federal level? That's my first question. Is that automatically screening and monitoring whatever the
No, it's fine. I'd be happy to answer that question. That's an excellent question. We have a task force where individuals with Philadelphia police and all of the local and state law enforcement agencies work with the FBI, work with the ATF. If they see a case, if a call is made to 911 and Philadelphia police responds and they see a case where there might be federal jurisdiction and it might be appropriate for federal prosecution, they will bring it to our office. Janine will look at that case and we'll make a decision about whether we can prosecute it federally. So the citizens don't need to worry about bringing it federal because the police will if it's appropriate to do so.
With respect to the hate crimes or bias motivated crimes, you should know that in addition to reporting it to the Philadelphia Police Department, whether he's asked to or not, CJ and his fellow agents are looking routinely through all of the reports of those types of incidents and looking for cases that would be appropriate for federal prosecution. So you may never hear about that if for some reason it doesn't establish or the facts don't give us the evidence that we need to prove a federal offense. But my point to you is, just like with the task force that USA Williams described, we're specifically out there looking for hate crimes, whether you're reported directly to the FBI or not.
For us, the director, because we're not sure whether this case should work.
We're happy to take your call anytime you pick up the phone.
Okay, thank you for that question, Mr. Sue. I'm opening up to other questions. Any questions online? So I'm just going to repeat the question so people hear it online. Mr. Ruben David asked if there is an app for his phone to report crimes quickly in addition to calling 911.
Well, I can tell you that one of the innovations that our communications bureau will be moving into will be texting for reporting and communicating with police radio. I'm going to throw it back to our communications, our public affairs for a second. Eric, do we have an app that I know that there are crimes that can be reported by going to our website, and they can go onto phillypolice.com.
That's right, sir. Yeah. Go to phillypolice.com, we actually have a submitted tip section. And while it won't provide real-time results, you can get information to us. It will be vetted. We'll make sure that we get it to the right folks in a timely manner. And as Deputy Commissioner Nash just said, text to 911. It's actually in the soft launch right now. So anywhere within the city limits, if you send text to 911, it will be received by our operators. This isn't something that we're ready to announce at a widespread level right now. What we want to have out there is basically call if you can, text if you can. But it is an avenue that is available out there. If you ever find yourself in a situation where making a phone call might not be feasible, please you can send that text to 911.
So to reiterate to Mr. David, thank you for the question. We're nearby the launch. We're not quite there yet. You can always go online. But let me also say that if you don't want to call 911 because there is a concern about having a uniformed police officer come out to a scene, and there might be some concerns about being, there is always the ability to call our tip line, which is 215-686-TIPS, TIPS. And you can just provide information to a person on the other end That's not automatically. You can remain anonymous if you have information about a crime, any information that can help us in an investigation, or if you witness something. We prefer 911. It's the simple, immediate call, but there are other alternatives.
Great, thank you. Any other? Yes.
Yes, our police radio has, for the 911 call, we have a language line. We can interpret, we can provide translation services for, I believe, virtually any language. If they call 911, our communications dispatch operators will recognize that there may be a language barrier, and I don't have the full procedure, but they can get through and they can get the dialect, the language, to be able to understand the complaint that's coming into 911 to get the necessary police response. And then from an investigative perspective, we also have the ability to conduct language translation at any time with the police officers. Once they've responded, they can get somebody on the phone in order to speak to a victim or a witness or a complainant at the scene, who can translate for the officers so that we can overcome the language barrier.
Thank you. I see back there, did Miss Mabel Chan have her hand up? Miss Mabel Chan is the a local community leader, but also the national advisor to the Chinese Benevolent Association.
Oh, thank you. My question is like our Asian people, like Chinese, Chinatown, right? Many Chinese people, they call 911, they only speak Chinese. It's a very big problem. So they tell me, say, because they just speak Chinese, and I think the police department maybe not understand what they're talking. Just hang up the phone and call, they still try and call, but they still speak Chinese. The big problem is don't understand what they talking. I know police department like to try to help them, but language is a big problem. So it's not like last 2 weeks, we have my friend, they people want the money, and she's call many times, but she cannot speak English, just Chinese. So we need the police department to help. This is really big problem. So we need your help. We know call 911 is best, but they cannot speak English, only Chinese. Sorry about it, and thank you all the police department care about the people who need the help. Thank you very much.
So Ms. Chan brought up a couple of points. One is a good point, is if no one can even communicate what language they speak, that sounds like a problem.
Yeah, so what I wanted to sort of start off, and then I can let the Deputy Commissioner continue, is that all city services in Philadelphia require language access. So as you heard earlier with the police, they're able to respond whether they have officers who speak the given language or get interpretation services. One of the things that we talk about when you call 911, yes, it's ideally, it'd be great if you had someone on the line immediately speak that language. It's a little bit of an ask, but we try to say that, if a person can at least just say, I speak, and then whatever language. So I speak Mandarin, I speak Cantonese. That way they can get the correct interpretation. I'll give you a real quick example, because when I was working the papal visit, when the Pope was here, we had a lot of issues on the ground. And like someone would say, like, I speak Chinese, but then when they come up to the person, they spoke Cantonese and not Mandarin. So it helps just to have at least that much. And then also to understand that it might take a couple of seconds, minutes to get someone to talk who can actually help with that.
Let me just follow up a little bit on what Randy said. And I guess at the end of the day, Ms. Chan, that what is being said is that there is an ask, that we are wanting to help. I don't have the answer to say, and I don't doubt that there has been a level of frustration with trying to communicate to police, the 911 system, but feeling that they're not getting anywhere. You know, but I do want you to know that we have location services. So if the call is dialed in from a landline, the operator knows where it is. And even if it is an unknown situation, they can communicate that to the officers on the street to go to a certain location. We also have location services for where the cell phone is coming in. So the best advice I can give is to reiterate what Randy said, which is to communicate to the members of the community, to be able to say those three words, I speak and the language. That is, and it may not be possible for everybody, but if we can communicate that through the community to those who have language challenges of English, that would be really helpful. But the other thing I would ask is that when they call 911, they try to stay on the line, because the longer they're on the line, the greater the chance that the police will be able to recognize that the police in our communications bureau, at our radio room, will be able to recognize there's a language barrier, and they will make attempts to get the translation services going while they are trying to send the officers there. Matt, do you have any other thoughts on this problem?
No, just to compound on that, just to get out the messaging that the I speak. I love that. I think that's a great thing. I think John can certainly help with that. Mabel, you can help with that. You're so influential in the neighborhood. So we can certainly get that messaging out. I think that would be perfect in regards to that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, thank you. I see Mr. Adams who has a follow-up, and then let's jump to online.
Just follow up on your comments earlier. Somebody mentioned about the app file a report. So the app itself, if you can develop multi-language there, people can read. I'm sure they can follow easily to follow up with the report.
It's a great idea, and it's something that our public affairs officer will communicate along with my staff that's here, and we'll communicate that to our communications bureau. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And some online comments? Okay, sounds like we're moving into the technology age on the phones.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate that we're getting there. The Philadelphia police are notoriously a little bit behind the technological times, but I can tell you that we have a really incredible public affairs technology person back there that's taken us a long way. Eric is looking around, but he knows I'm talking about him. He's really good, and I know he's going to take a lot of these ideas back to our the people that are responsible for the app. So while I can't say right now that we have it, we'll be working on those things, and the language and the ability to click on and identify a language, that dialect that they could speak, is something that we'll try to incorporate. So thanks for that suggestion.
Great. Did I see Mr. Horchow? Did you have your hand raised? Oh, Mr. Naren? Yes.
Oh, no, I just wanted to ask, first of all, thank you so much for meeting with the law enforcement. A lot of stuff with the rising with COVID and big crime, what we're seeing on the ground and from our community members is like, you see a lot of fraudulent and scams that's happening with community members. We had a few that lost almost $100 grand through catfishing and through fraudulent investments. And what they're doing is they're targeting through Facebook, and they're messaging them through Messenger, and also from there they move into WhatsApp, right? And we wanted to know, as a community, like who do they report to? Is there like a task force on the federal side or even the local side as well too? Because a lot of these folks is like they're ashamed of even coming out with this, but we're seeing a lot of pattern on it, and they would use excuse of saying like, you know, we can't meet you right now, we can't see you right now. I'm in Paris, I'm stuck, and I have my kid, and I need money transferred to this, that, and they whole livelihood lost, and folks are going through a lot of mental illness. So we just wanted to raise that concern.
So I just want to introduce Mr. Naren Chin. He's with the Cambodian community and also a commissioner on the Mayor's Commission on Asian American Affairs. Thank you for that question about fraud and scams using social media and technology.
I'd be happy to address that. It's a terrible problem. It's really upsetting to hear those stories, and I know it is widespread and people have lost a lot. My request is please call the FBI. Don't be ashamed. You did nothing wrong. If you were victimized by somebody else, please call the FBI. Not only can the FBI work on your investigation, and if you call quickly enough, the FBI can sometimes stop the money from being transferred away and can get your money back. The faster you call, the higher the likelihood is the FBI can do something about that. But also, if you report to the FBI, you're helping protect the next potential victim. The more the FBI knows about what happened to you, the more FBI knows how to protect other people in the community. So you're not only helping yourself, you're helping others in your community. So please report it. Please don't be ashamed. The FBI understands what you're going through, and we really do want to help you and others.
Thank you. Devin, any more comments?
The translation is Asian hate crimes happen frequently, making people scared. Today's session is really helpful, especially on prevention. At a federal level, is there an answer on why Asian hate crimes happen and also how to avoid in the future?
The why is probably pretty difficult to answer, frankly. Although certainly there are elements of the community that have exploited some of the rhetoric around COVID to scapegoat members of the community who it's an excuse. I think, frankly, the biases, the prejudice were probably already there. And in some ways, unfortunately, over the last 18 months or so, even longer, I guess at this point, COVID has been an excuse to act on some of those impulses. That being said, if a crime is happening, the first thing you want to do is call 911. And as we've been talking about, report it. Please report it. And then we can start our investigation, and then we can do our best to hold the perpetrator accountable. Like I mentioned during our discussion earlier, we don't have the tools, nor should we, to prosecute somebody for how they think. We do have the tools to hold somebody accountable when they act on those thoughts in a way that is violent or threatening. But to do that, we need you to report. Hopefully, we'll pull together as a community and be able to move past a lot of this unpleasantness. I think, unfortunately, a lot of the uptick is related, as I said, to some of the rhetoric that we've all seen recently. I don't have an answer necessarily for that, but I do have a plea, which is report it to us, please.
Thank you. Online?
We have another question. Could the police department reach out to local Chinese or ethnic organizations to provide casual online interpretation to help people in that ethnic group?
It's a great question. I think the cameras are pointing towards us, but the reach out, the communication to those groups are behind everybody in this room. I'm grateful for the officers, the detectives, the members of the police department that have indicated that they are part of the police community and also the Asian community, and they want to help. And I will say that this is a start. This is the beginning of a dialogue, and I'm grateful for the officers' participation. And I'm going to ask these officers that have shown up to provide their thoughts on how do we reach out to the members of their community to get the message out and provide the different things that are being asked for to help. So that's that's where we are. I mean, and let me reiterate, when Janine, AUSA, Janine Lenahan reached out to me at first and talked about wanting to provide an outreach program at the direction, or either initiated or at the direction of United States Attorney Jen Williams, I think I kind of jumped up and down. And I said, your timing was incredible, because we had just been talking about identifying the officers that are in the police department who are part of the Asian community and want to help. So this is the time that we're getting it started. We have a lot of work to do, but I think that we have a bright future because we have a base to grow from. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Commissioner. I just want to add that language is critical, but also Mr. Gibson talked about trust. I know that under Captain James of this 6th district here in our community, he's required his officers to build that trust. And there's some officers that are not Asian and don't speak the Asian language, but they've been very successful in building that trust. So language is important, but also the willingness and effort by officials to try to bridge that gap. So, I mean, Captain James, I just want to applaud you and your community relations officers for doing a fine job to build that trust, because they don't speak like Chinese in this community, but business people see them in the street and say, oh yeah, we know them. So that's great.
Thanks for recognizing that, John. And I know that some of the officers are here, and they've taken a real personal interest in making sure that the Asian community recognizes that they have friends. As John indicated, not speaking the language, but that's not going to stop them from working to benefit the Asian community.
Devin, some other comment?
Can I say something? I'm in the online. May I have
We've got
permission to
another
speak?
question here about, what about cases that are less serious, such as between neighbors or neighbors of the same race, and still experiencing what they believe to be bullying or harassment? Who should they reach out to?
In the city of Philadelphia, they can reach out to my office. Again, the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations works to basically addresses those situations that don't rise to the criminal level. Our division is, provides conflict resolution and mediation services to neighbors. So things like community tensions, neighbor disputes. Again, just like any other city services, we would provide a language interpretation, or I'm fortunate to have a few different languages represented on staff, being Spanish, Mandarin, and Khmer, the Cambodian language. But if it's another language, we can work through that. One of the benefits of, I guess, with COVID is that a lot of times, we've been using more Zoom types of and internet-based resolution, bringing people together that way. And so that's another avenue where we can bring interpretation services as needed.
Great. Well, we have just time for, go ahead.
Just to add to that, just want to address the issue of seriousness. I mean, what we were talking about tonight with respect to some of the hate crime statutes that we talked about were rights that you have that we are empowered to protect and hold individuals accountable for violating those rights. The right to live where you want, the right to get an education, the right to go on public transportation. These are important whether or not you suffer serious bodily injury or minor injury. We've done misdemeanors, we'll continue to do misdemeanors. The question from our standpoint generally revolves around, do we know about it? Have you reported it? Can we prove it? Those are the questions that we want to answer with respect to the seriousness. Is nobody should be hurt. That would be preferential, right? We don't want to see anybody seriously hurt. And we want to take care of these instances where we can before somebody gets seriously hurt. So please don't view seriousness or what you perceive to be seriousness as an obstacle to report. We want to hear about it, please.
Great. I think we have time for one more comment. Let's see if we can do a quick one.
Okay. See, we have a question. Who provides technical assistance when, for example, the DA office charging unit makes erroneous statements about what qualifies as a hate crime or bias incident? So who provides technical assistance? Thank you.
Well, I'll just make a comment about erroneous statements, the DA's office. The United States Attorney's Office is represented here today, and they use the federal statutes. And that's the federal law across the country. The prosecutors in the district attorney's office use the statutes that exist for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And the level of what is a hate crime isn't defined exactly the same. And I've experienced the frustration of a crime that has been committed against a member of the Asian community, but has lacked the charge that would seem to allow it to rise to a hate crime. And in the Commonwealth, and for the state of Pennsylvania, ethnic intimidation is the statute that is used to elevate the crime from the standalone crime to a higher level because of the race of the individual who is the victim. I can't speak for the district attorney's office. I can just say that if there is a concern that on the state level, it's not being charged appropriately, an individual can always go to the Attorney General's office, which is the statewide prosecutor's office for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But as United States Attorney Jen Williams and Assistant Eric Gibson and Janine have all spoken about, that once the crime is reported, the federal authorities, the United States Attorney's Office will review to see if that can go as a federal prosecution. So the Attorney General's office can be contacted. And I know a lot of people are generally not pleased with some of the determinations that have been made, but I can just say this, that they seriously weigh all of the facts and circumstances and the evidence that the police department is able to gather and present to the district attorney's office in order to see if it fits into the criteria for that charge of ethnic intimidation. And that's the same thing that the federal government does as well. So it's frustrating, but it's the reality of what's going on. We have to have the evidence and we have to be able to support the charge. Eric might have something to say.
There are circumstances where the state and local authorities are willing, able, forcefully committed to prosecuting a case. Occasionally, sometimes the case doesn't end in the way that everyone would like to see. Occasionally in those circumstances, we are there to look at it a second time and perhaps take it on a second time as a federal matter, not a state matter, and see if we can right the wrong that happened in a different jurisdiction. It can be a very difficult issue because it's not our role to tread over the state or local authorities. We're supposed to be working together. And sometimes that requires us to defer to them. Sometimes we ask them to defer to us. Sometimes it makes sense for them to go first. And if they can't get justice, then we come from behind. But to do any of that, again, it comes back to this idea, it needs to be reported. And if you're concerned about how the case is being handled, particularly in this area that we're talking about right now, CJ will answer the phone, I will answer the phone, we'll talk with you about the offense, and we'll see what can be done.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I know there's a couple other hands up, but we've gone beyond time. Are you able to stay a few minutes longer? That's great. So on behalf of the Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation, I sincerely want to thank U.S. Attorney Ms. Williams for bringing all your resources here tonight. I want to thank Deputy Commissioner Nash for bringing the police department, and I know Commissioner Outlaw was here earlier. And of course, Randy Duque for bringing the Human Relations Commission to this meeting. I know Ms. Romana Lee Akiyama was here earlier. I just want to acknowledge that she and Randy Duque are part of a city effort to bring their personnel and peers together to focus on Asian American issues. And of course, I want to thank all of you who attended in person, and thank those of you who attended on social media to participate. You're going to have access to these individuals who are here tonight, emails, telephone numbers, and you will get all of that. Just reach out to us at Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation. Again, thank you so much for this. It's so valuable. Thank you. Good evening.